What do you do when your own wife tells you to accept another man at the center of your marriage, or lose her altogether? How far can someone push an ultimatum before the quiet one at the table finally stands up, walks away, and lets the law speak for him? This is how I went from being the jealous, controlling husband in her story to the man calmly watching her get served in public. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I used to believe a marriage could survive almost anything if both people tried. I held on to that idea even when my wife, Lena, began spending more and more time with her male friend Darren, telling me he was the one who understood her better. At first, I tried to ignore the small signs that something was shifting, thinking every couple has moments of imbalance. But the jokes about me being too traditional, the late-night messages she hid when I walked into the room, and the way she defended him more fiercely than she ever defended us slowly pushed me into a quiet corner. I kept telling myself to stay calm and observe before reacting, because anger never builds anything stable. Still, it became harder to pretend nothing was happening when friends, coworkers, and even family started repeating her words back to me, painting me as the insecure husband who stood in the way of her freedom. I didn't shout or demand anything. Instead, I watched, listened, and remembered. I learned that when someone gives you an ultimatum, accept another man, or lose them, it tells you more about the marriage than any argument ever could. My name is Ivo Marlowe, and the first time I really noticed how much space Darren had in our life, I was standing at the kitchen sink with my hands in the dishwater. Lena sat at the table with her laptop open and her phone in her hand, laughing at something on the screen. She said that Darren had just sent her another joke and that only he really understood her sense of humor. I asked how her day had gone, but she hardly looked up. I told myself not to be dramatic because people had friends, and one friend's name appearing often did not mean danger. Still, her laughter felt louder than it needed to be in our small kitchen, and for the first time I felt like an outsider in a room that belonged to me. Over the next weeks, Darren's name slipped into almost every part of our routine. Lena said that he understood her work stress better than I did, because he also dealt with clients and events. She told me that she could talk to him about things I would not get, and that he said she deserved more freedom and fun. When I suggested we plan an evening alone, she said that I was being old-fashioned and that a modern marriage included close friends of any gender. I tried to explain that it was not about trust, but about how much of her emotional energy now went to him instead of us. She replied that questioning her friendships was controlling, and she added that even her mother agreed I needed to relax. Then she laughed and said that Darren already felt like family. That word sat inside my chest like a heavy stone, because no one had asked me before giving him that place. Nights changed first. We used to lie in bed and talk until we fell asleep, but now most of our talking happened with screens between us. Lena lay on her side, facing the wall, her phone lighting up the dark room every few minutes. Sometimes she pulled it closer when I turned toward her. When I asked who she was chatting with so late, she said that it was just the group and that I needed to stop acting suspicious. She said that if I trusted her, I would not care who made her laugh. I told her that I did trust her, but that I missed talking without the phone in her hand. She said that nothing stopped me from talking, and then she kept typing. I lay there listening to the soft taps of her fingers, the small vibrations of new messages, and the sound of our old habit disappearing one notification at a time. One evening, after a quiet dinner where almost all the conversation had been between Lena and her phone, I noticed a small detail that stayed with me. She left her phone face up on the bed when she went to shower, the screen still awake. I did not unlock it because I did not want to become the man who searched through private messages. But a notification at the top showed Darren's name and a preview saying that he was glad she was finally standing up for herself at home. Next to it was a small heart icon. I stared at that line for a moment too long, then turned the screen off and placed the phone exactly where it had been. When Lena came back, she said that Darren thought it was great that she no longer let me control her social life. I asked when I had tried to control anything. She said that the way I questioned their closeness was proof enough, and that if I could not handle it, maybe I was not ready for a modern relationship. I did not raise my voice. I simply said that boundaries were normal in any marriage. She rolled her eyes and reached for the phone again. That night, when she finally fell asleep with the phone still in her hand, the room was almost completely dark except for the thin blue light on her face. Another message arrived, and the screen lit up. Carefully, I slid the phone from her fingers and placed it on the nightstand so it would not fall. The message preview showed Darren telling her that if I did not accept their dynamic, she should not waste time with me. I felt something inside me become very still. It was not a sharp pain, more like a slow, cold wave moving through me. I took my own phone from the drawer and opened our chat history. I scrolled back to where she had written that I had to adjust or lose her, that life was too short to stay with someone who did not accept a male best friend in every part of our life. I took a screenshot, then another one, making sure the dates and times were clear. I did not know yet what I would do with them. I only knew that my memory was starting to blur the edges, and I wanted her exact words somewhere I could not forget. The next morning, I tried to act like everything was normal, because I still believed maybe things could turn if I stayed patient. I made coffee, packed Mila's lunch, and set out 3 mugs on the counter. Lena walked in already typing, smiling at the screen. She said that Darren had just sent a funny story from his gym. I told her that I hoped her day would go well, and that maybe we could have dinner together, just the 2 of us, one evening soon. She said that she and Darren already had plans with friends on Friday, and that I could join if I promised not to kill the mood. When I stayed quiet, she sighed and said that it was exhausting to feel judged in her own home. I replied that I did not want her to feel judged, but I also did not want to feel like a visitor in my own marriage. She said that if I could not handle a friend, I should ask myself why I was so insecure. Then she kissed Mila on the head, grabbed her bag, and left, still smiling at her phone. After the door closed, the apartment fell into a deep, careful silence. I stood in the hallway and listened to the echo of their footsteps fade on the stairs. A moment later, I heard Lena's voice floating up from below, lighter now that she thought I could not hear. She told someone, and I did not have to guess who, that I would either get over it or not be around much longer. The stairwell carried every word clearly. I stayed where I was until the building door slammed and the sound cut off. Then I went back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. I opened a new folder in the gallery and gave it a simple, neutral name, nothing dramatic, then moved the screenshots there. My thumb rested on the screen for a few seconds while I thought about what I was really doing. I told myself that I was not planning to attack anyone. I was only keeping a clear record in case one day my calm nature was used against me. When I finally checked the time, my phone screen lit up with a small notification I had almost forgotten. A quiet alarm appeared at the top of the display with the words, "Meeting, personal 9:30 a.m." I watched the letters glow for a few seconds in the still air of the bedroom. I did not dismiss it right away. Instead, I sat there, listening to the distant hum of the building and the faint noise of traffic outside, and I wondered what kind of meeting I really needed, and how much longer I could pretend that this was just a phase that would pass on its own. At work the next day, the air felt heavier than usual, even though nothing looked different on the surface. The same gray desks, the same slow printer, the same low murmur of people greeting each other. I sat down at my station, unlocked my computer, and tried to lose myself in tickets and error logs. For a short while, it worked. I answered emails, reset passwords, and told myself that home and work could stay separate if I just focused hard enough. Then I heard my name in a tone that did not sound like a simple question. A coworker called out to me and said that he had seen something funny online. He asked if I had checked Lena's latest post. I said that I had not been on social media that morning. He turned his monitor slightly toward me and told me that I might want to see it. On his screen was a rooftop photo from the previous weekend. Lena stood in the center of the frame, leaning into Darren with her hand around his arm. Her head tilted back in laughter, her dress bright under the city lights. In the corner of the image, my profile was barely visible, slightly turned away from them. The caption said that she was grateful for people who really understood her energy and did not try to hold her back. Several laughing reactions and comments said that every woman deserved a Darren in her life. One person wrote that some husbands were just too insecure to see their wives shine. My coworker laughed and said that my wife looked like she knew how to have fun. I forced a tight smile and said that she always loved a good party. Inside, something in me stepped back and watched from a distance, as if the person on the screen and the person at the desk were not the same man. When I went to the break room to make coffee, 2 colleagues stood by the counter, talking about the post. They did not see me come in at first. One of them said that she admired Lena for not letting an old-fashioned partner stop her from living her life. The other replied that she hoped her own boyfriend would also accept it if she got close to a male friend. They laughed, and then one of them noticed me by the kettle. There was an awkward pause, followed by a light comment that it was all just teasing. I said that I understood, and that social media often showed only one side of a story. They nodded, but their eyes said that they still believed the version where I was the jealous husband in the background. I stirred my coffee slowly, feeling the little wooden stick knock against the edges of the cup in a steady rhythm. Back at my desk, I opened a new spreadsheet. The blank cells felt calm and obedient, nothing like the messy flow of conversation and gossip around me. In the first row, I typed a simple header with the word events. Then I added columns for date, place, and short note. I started with the night Lena called me old-fashioned and told me that I had to adjust or lose her. Next, I entered the date of the rooftop photo and wrote that the caption suggested I was holding her back. I listed the comments about insecurity and wives who needed real support. I did not add judgments, only facts that someone else could read without knowing our story and still understand the pattern. With each line, I felt less like a confused husband and more like a careful observer, who was finally writing down what he saw. A little later, my manager, Nadia, stopped by my desk. She asked softly if everything was okay. She said that she had heard some loud jokes in the break room and wanted to be sure I did not feel harassed. I told her that I appreciated her concern and that I was fine. I said that people were just having fun online and that it was not a work issue. She watched me for a moment, then asked if I was sure. I replied that if anything serious ever happened that affected my performance or peace at work, I would want it handled properly and through the right channels. She nodded and said that this was the best way to think, then told me that her door was open if I ever needed to talk. When she walked away, I added another line in my spreadsheet. Brief talk with HR, date and time, no complaint filed, calm state. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Each time my email pinged, my eyes jumped to the corner of the screen, half expecting another indirect reminder that my private life was becoming a topic for other people's entertainment. Around lunchtime, a message popped up in the group chat. Some coworkers were planning to go to another rooftop event at the same building where the earlier photos had been taken. One of them wrote that they hoped I would come this time and not stay home like a boring husband. Another added a laughing emoji and said that Lena seemed to have more fun when I was not there. I stared at the message for a few moments. Instead of answering, I set my status to away and walked to the window at the end of the office. The city lay below, busy and indifferent to my small problem. In the afternoon, I called Jonas while I stood near the emergency stairwell, where the echo made every word feel louder. I told him about the photo and the comments. He said that people loved a simple story, and right now the story they liked was that I was the stiff man and Lena was the free spirit trapped by me. He told me that if I did not start keeping track of how things really happened, someone else would write the script for me later. I said that I already had a spreadsheet and some screenshots. He went quiet for a second, then answered that this was good, as long as I stayed calm and did not use them to threaten anyone. I said that I had no interest in threats. I only wanted the truth written somewhere safe. When I returned to my desk, there was another notification on my screen. This time it was a direct message from a coworker's partner who had been at the previous rooftop party. She sent a very short video clip. In it, Lena threw her arm around Darren and told the group that he understood her better than any man she had ever been with. People cheered and whistled, and someone shouted that I needed to learn to share. I saved the video into a private folder on my personal cloud, labeled only with the date and place. Then I added another line to the spreadsheet describing the clip and who had sent it. My movements were slow and steady, like someone sorting tools on a shelf, not like a man in the middle of a storm. As the day drew to a close, the office lights dimmed slightly, and the sound of chairs moving and computers shutting down filled the space. I gathered my things and headed toward the parking garage. The air there was cool and smelled of concrete and exhaust. I sat in my car without starting the engine, letting the silence wrap around me. My phone lay on the passenger seat, screen dark. I picked it up and looked again at the group chat invitation to the next rooftop event. If I stayed home, I knew the story would continue without me, with new jokes about the invisible husband. If I went, I would see for myself how far things had gone, not through social media, but with my own eyes. While I stared at the screen, the phone suddenly lit up with an incoming call. There was no name, only a small emoji as the contact. The sound was muted, but the screen vibrated slightly on the seat. At the same moment, a coworker walking past my car window knocked lightly on the glass and gestured toward the street. He said through the half-open window that they hoped to see me at the rooftop on Friday and that it would be good for me to relax. I watched the emoji contact flash and fade as the call stopped. I declined the call without answering and told my coworker that I would probably come this time. As he walked away, I looked at the dark screen again and decided that if everyone wanted to act like this was a game, I needed to see the whole board before I made my next move. Friday evening arrived with a sky that looked too soft for what I knew might happen. I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom, buttoning a shirt that Lena once said made me look too serious. I heard her laughing in the living room as she finished getting ready. When I stepped out, she was already in her dress, bright and fitted, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror with her phone in one hand. She said that Darren was already on his way to the rooftop and that the group was excited to see us. The way she said us sounded different now, like I was just one part of a crowd around her, not the person she had chosen to build a life with. I told her she looked nice, and she smiled, but the smile belonged more to her reflection than to me. The ride to the rooftop bar felt longer than it was. In the elevator on the way up, Lena leaned against the mirror and checked her messages. She told someone that we were almost there and added a row of excited emojis. I stood beside her with my hands in my pockets, listening to the soft music playing above our heads. I watched the floor numbers rise and thought about the spreadsheet on my home computer and the quiet folder of screenshots waiting behind my simple password. I did not feel powerful or brave. I felt like a man walking into a room where his life was about to be discussed in front of strangers. When the doors opened, laughter and music spilled in, sharp and bright. The rooftop was already crowded. Soft lights hung overhead, and the city spread out around us in a sea of windows and distant cars. People stood in small groups, drinks in hand, voices overlapping. I spotted Darren near the bar before he saw us. He stood with two colleagues, relaxed and easy, like someone who believed he belonged everywhere. When Lena called his name, his face lit up, and he opened his arms slightly. She went to him first, wrapping her arms around him in a hug that lasted a few beats too long. I followed behind at a slower pace. When I reached them, Darren extended his hand and said he was glad I had come. His tone said something else, as if this was his territory and I was finally entering it. I shook his hand and said it was good to see him too. Inside, I watched myself from a distance again, careful not to miss any detail. We moved to a standing table overlooking the city. Lena stood between us, her body turned more toward Darren. She laughed at almost everything he said, touching his arm or shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A few people from my office joined our circle, and I saw the recognition in their eyes when they realized who Darren was. They had seen photos and comments, and now they saw the trio live. One of them joked that this was the famous friendship they had heard about. Lena lifted her glass proudly and said that real friendships were stronger than old habits or jealous rules. The word jealous slid easily off her tongue, aimed at me without needing to be named. As the night went on, the music grew louder, and the drinks flowed more freely. Someone suggested a toast. A coworker lifted his glass and said they should celebrate Lena for being true to herself and not letting anyone dim her light. People cheered, and Lena turned to Darren, not to me, as she raised her own glass. She said that he had been her rock through many things, that he understood her better than anyone, and that modern relationships needed this kind of honesty. The word honesty almost made me laugh, but I swallowed it and kept my face still. Some guests glanced at me, curious, as if waiting for a reaction. I simply lifted my glass and took a slow sip, tasting nothing. In the middle of the noise, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I stepped slightly away from the group, near a low wall where the city wind felt cooler. When I checked the screen, I saw a message from a contact named only with a simple word: follow-up. The text asked if tomorrow morning at Harbor Cafe 7:45 a.m. would still work. I looked back at the group, where Lena had thrown her head back in laughter again. I typed a short reply confirming the time, then locked the phone. This was not a lawyer or official name, only someone who could help me understand my options and explain what handling things properly really meant in a legal sense. I was not making threats. I was gathering information, step by step, while my public image shrank into the role of the stiff, jealous husband. When I returned to the table, a coworker's partner was holding up her phone, recording a short clip. She asked Lena to say something about love and friendship. Lena smiled into the camera and wrapped one arm around Darren's shoulders. She said that sometimes the person who really sees you is not the one you married first, and that everyone deserved a friend who made them feel alive. People laughed and clapped. Someone shouted that I was lucky to have such an open-minded wife. I felt the heat rise in my face, but I kept my voice calm when I answered that being open-minded and being respectful were not the same thing. The remark floated above the noise and then disappeared as the music shifted to a louder track. A little later, I stepped away again, this time to the quieter elevator lobby just inside the glass doors. The music was muffled there, and the light was softer. I took out my phone and opened the Notes app. I wrote a short description of the evening so far: rooftop, group toast, Lena calling Darren her rock, remarks about being seen, people cheering. I saved the note, closed it, and then opened my calendar to see the small reminder for the cafe meeting glowing on the next morning's schedule. I stared at it for a moment, feeling how strange it was that my life now had two tracks: the loud public one upstairs and the quiet, careful one inside my phone. While I stood there, one of my colleagues came out to check on me. He asked if everything was okay. I said that I was just taking a moment and that I was fine. He said he hoped I understood that everyone was just having fun and that Lena seemed like the kind of person who needed a lot of connection. I replied that I understood she needed connection, but that I also needed respect, even if I did not shout about it. He shifted uncomfortably and then said he would see me back out there. When the glass doors swung open again, the music rushed in, along with Lena's voice. I went back to the table just as another group decided they wanted a photo. Someone waved me closer and said that they needed a picture of the three of us together. Lena stood between me and Darren again, her arm around his waist this time. I stood on her other side, leaving a polite space between us. The person with the phone joked that they wanted to capture the modern triangle, and several people laughed. I felt their eyes on my face, waiting to see if I would flinch or break. I told myself to breathe evenly, in and out, and to remember that cameras caught more than just smiles. The photographer lifted the phone and counted down. In that small pause, with the city lights behind us and the music pressing at our backs, I realized something very simple. Lena did not see this as a crisis. She saw it as a performance, and I was just another character who needed to read his lines correctly. If I argued or walked away now, I would give them more proof for the story they already liked. If I stayed calm and watched, I could carry every detail out of the scene and into the quiet place where real decisions are made. The phone flash burst, bright and sudden, freezing our faces in that exact arrangement. Lena smiling, pressed to Darren, and me standing beside them with a controlled expression. The light faded, but the outline of that moment stayed burned in my mind. As people checked the photo and laughed, I knew that this image would travel long after the music stopped, and that I needed to decide what to do with a marriage that now treated my dignity like a party game. The family birthday dinner came a week later, and by then the rooftop photo had already made its quiet rounds through different circles. I knew some of the people at that dinner had seen it, even if they pretended not to recognize Darren when Lena led him into the restaurant. The place was busy, with a long table reserved near the back. Balloons floated above the chairs, children ran between the aisles, and the smell of grilled food and sweet sauces filled the air. When we arrived, Lena walked ahead of me, greeting her parents and cousins with bright energy. I followed with Mila's hand in mine, feeling the familiar stretch between my calm pace and her rush toward the attention. At the table, I noticed an empty seat next to Lena and another one on her other side. I assumed one was meant for me, but when Darren walked in, she waved him over and guided him into the seat closest to her. She told everyone that she had invited him because he was like family now, and that he never failed to lift her mood. She pointed to the other chair and said that I could sit there if I wanted, adding that it would be good for me to get used to the new balance. I sat down across from her instead, between Mark and one of Lena's cousins, where I could see both her and Darren clearly. Throughout the appetizers, Lena behaved as if this arrangement was the most natural thing in the world. She leaned toward Darren to share small jokes, touched his arm when she laughed, and told stories about their recent outings. When someone asked how things were at home, she said that life was easier now that she had someone who really understood her and supported her growth. Evelyn nodded and told her that every woman deserved that kind of support. She added that some men could be a little slow to adjust, but they would have to learn or step aside. I knew that everyone at the table understood who the slow man was in that sentence. When the main dishes arrived, the noise at the table grew louder. Children argued over fries, plates clattered, and waiters moved quickly between chairs. In the middle of this, Lena started a new story about how I supposedly disliked her having male friends. She said that I wanted to control her social life and keep her locked into some outdated idea of marriage. She leaned toward Darren while she spoke, as if including him in the complaint. People glanced at me with a mix of curiosity and quiet judgment. I felt my jaw tighten, then relaxed it. I reminded myself that I no longer wanted to win arguments in the moment. I wanted the truth clear when it finally mattered. When there was a small pause in the conversation, I spoke. I said that I had no problem with her having friends, but that I believed some boundaries were normal in a marriage, especially when a friend occupied the same emotional space as a partner. I said that it was difficult to feel respected when I constantly watched my wife present another man as the person who understood her more than anyone. My voice was calm and even. I did not raise it, and I did not accuse anyone directly. I simply described how her choices made our home feel smaller and colder. Lena put down her fork and stared at me as if I had just broken a rule. She said that my words only proved how controlling I was and that I could not stand her having one close friend who did not report to me. She said that Darren had been there for her when I was emotionally distant and that I should feel grateful instead of threatened. She added that she refused to live like a prisoner in her own life just to protect my pride. Evelyn quickly supported her, saying that women had a right to friendships and freedom and that men who could not handle that should let them go. Mark sat beside her, silent and tense, staring at his plate. Then Lena did what I had known for a while she might do. She said that if I could not fully accept Darren as a permanent part of our life, including our home and our family events, then she would file for divorce. She did not say it in a private, quiet way. She said it at the long table, in front of our daughter, her parents, and several relatives who barely knew me beyond these gatherings. A hush fell over part of the table. Some cousins looked uncomfortable, others pretended to rearrange cutlery. Darren shifted in his seat, but did not speak. I felt the air press against my chest for a second, then loosen again. I did not answer right away. I took a sip of water and looked at Mila, who sat further down between her grandparents, focused on her food. I told myself that whatever I said next would shape how she remembered this moment, even if she did not fully understand it yet. When I finally responded, I said that threatening divorce in front of family over a boundary concern said more about the health of our marriage than anything else. I repeated that I would not yell or cause a scene in a restaurant, but that I would not pretend this was normal. Lena shook her head and said that my refusal to celebrate her friendship proved I did not really love her as she was. Then she turned away and started a different conversation with Darren and a cousin, effectively closing the matter for the evening in her mind. After dinner, I offered to take Mila for a short walk in the park across the street while the others settled the bill and finished their conversations. The air outside was cooler, the noise of the restaurant replaced by distant traffic and children's laughter from the playground. Mila held my hand as we walked along a gravel path. She seemed quieter than usual. After a while, she asked if Darren would come to our house more often now. I asked why she wanted to know. She said that he always sat next to her mother and whispered with her, and that they sometimes forgot to listen when she talked. She added that she did not like when they talked about me like I was not there. Her small voice cut deeper than any comment at the dinner table. I knelt down to her level and told her that adults sometimes made bad choices and said things they should not say in front of children. I said that I loved her and that my goal was to make sure she always had a stable place to feel safe. She asked if that meant all three of us would still have breakfast together in the kitchen in the mornings. The question hung between us like a fragile glass. I did not answer right away, because I could not promise something I was no longer sure I could keep. I told her only that I would do everything I could to make sure she was okay, no matter what happened between the adults. That night, after we returned home and Mila was asleep, the apartment felt narrower somehow. Lena and I moved around each other like people in a crowded hallway. She spent most of the evening in the bedroom, phone in hand, laughing at messages. I stayed in the living room, the TV on low, my mind replaying the dinner. At one point, when the hallway was empty, I went to the shelf where we kept our binders and papers. I pulled out the one labeled Household. It was thicker than it had been a few months ago, filled with bills, contracts, and notes. I held it for a moment, then carried it to the bedroom and placed it in the bottom drawer of my side table. I turned the key and listened to the small click just before I heard Lena's footsteps in the hallway. When I sat down on the edge of the bed, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and saw a small reminder slide across the top of the screen. It read, Riverbank, 11:10 a.m., a simple title for a quiet note I had set earlier, tied to a place where I like to sit and think. As the soft glow lit the dark room, I remembered Mila's question in the park about our breakfast together. I let the reminder stay on the screen without dismissing it, feeling how those two things connected, a child's fear and a man's decision. I understood then that I could not accept a version of marriage where another man stood at the center of our life and my role was to nod along. I did not say anything aloud. I simply watched the reminder fade, knowing that the next steps would not be taken in anger, but they would be taken. The morning after the family dinner, I sat at the small cafe attached to a co-working space near the river. The place was quiet, with a few people bent over laptops and the soft hiss of the coffee machine in the background. I had my own laptop open on a corner table, my back to the wall. On the screen, a simple folder structure waited. Home, bank, auto, work, Mila. Inside each, smaller folders with dates and short labels. I was not doing anything dramatic. I was not plotting revenge. I was sorting, naming, and saving. I moved screenshots of Lena's messages into Archive A, then the video clips and photos into Archive B. Each file had a date, a short description, and nothing added that was not true. A small Cloud Sync pop-up appeared in the corner saying that a file had been uploaded successfully. I watched the notification fade, then checked that everything existed in at least two places: on the laptop, on the USB stick in my pocket, and in the private cloud folder. Later that morning, I put on headphones and stepped just outside into the co-working hallway for a call. My voice stayed low, and I walked slowly past closed doors. I spoke with someone whose job was to explain processes, not to fight my battles. I did not ask how to hurt anyone. I asked what it meant to handle things properly, what steps existed if a marriage crossed certain lines, and how a child's stability could be protected if a separation became real. The person on the other end answered in careful, neutral language about options, documentation, and the importance of records. I listened and took a few notes in a small digital file with a plain name. When the call ended, I went back to my table, closed all tabs that even hinted at legal topics, and opened a harmless work document. If anyone looked over my shoulder, they would have seen nothing unusual. In the afternoon, I stopped at the supermarket on my way home. The store was crowded, people pushing carts and scanning lists. As I waited in the checkout line, I heard someone say my name. A neighbor stood behind me, holding a basket. She mentioned that she had seen some of Lena's posts and that my wife seemed to be enjoying life. Her tone was light, but her eyes studied my face. She said that some men struggled when their partners became more social and free. I replied calmly that every person had a right to choose their own behavior, but that choices also brought consequences. I did not raise my voice or share details. I paid for the groceries, thanked the cashier, and walked out, aware that even chance meetings were now touched by Lena's version of our story. That evening, we took Mila to her activity at the community center hall. Children ran in circles, music played softly, and parents sat on metal chairs along the wall. I had expected it to be just the three of us. Instead, as we walked into the hall, Lena waved, and I saw Darren standing near the sign-in desk. He greeted Mila warmly and told her that he was happy to see her. She smiled politely, but then moved closer to my side. Lena said that he had wanted to support her and enjoy the event, framing it as a simple, kind gesture. I saw several parents glance at us, then look away quickly. We sat in the row of chairs, Lena between Darren and me. They spoke quietly, leaning in toward each other. I watched Mila during her activity, her focus broken now and then when she looked toward our row. At one point, two mothers whispered to each other and looked at us with raised eyebrows. I did not react outwardly. I sat with my hands folded and my back straight, letting the picture form: wife, male friend, husband, child in the middle. I told myself that this moment would live longer than the hour in the hall. It would become part of the pattern that I, and perhaps others later, would have to understand. On the way home, Lena said that Darren had offered to drive separately, but she had insisted we all walk back together to the parking area. She spoke about how supportive he was and how he understood her need for community. I said that it was interesting she needed community most when it made me look like an extra figure in their scene. She replied that if I felt like an extra, it was because I refused to join, not because she was pushing me out. I said that some positions in life could not be shared evenly, and that a husband and a male best friend could not both be at the center of the same space without someone losing ground. She shook her head and called my thinking rigid. That night, after Mila was in bed, the apartment's quiet felt almost organized. I moved through the rooms with small, deliberate actions. In the kitchen, I washed the mugs and placed two of them on opposite sides of the counter instead of together. In the guest room, I straightened the sheets and noticed that the bed had become familiar from the nights I chose to sleep there when arguments stretched too long. In the living room, I rearranged a small stack of mail, flipping through envelopes and setting aside anything related to finances, rent, or regular payments. I carried those to the locked drawer in the bedroom where the household binder now rested. At one point, Lena came into the room and asked why I seemed distant. I told her that I was not distant. I was adjusting to the new reality she had created. I said that she had made it clear that Darren would remain at the center of her life, and that she had done so in public, with jokes and threats that never stopped at the line of our front door. She said that she was only asking me to accept her friend, and that I was turning it into a crisis. I replied that when a wife gives her husband an ultimatum in front of family, telling him that either he accepts another man as a permanent part of their life, or she will file for divorce, that is already a crisis. She crossed her arms and asked what I planned to do about it. Her tone carried a challenge, as if she still believed I would eventually fold and agree to anything just to keep the marriage intact. I looked at her for a long moment and then spoke quietly. I said that I had decided not to fight with her in public or in private anymore about this friend. I told her that if she truly wanted to follow through on her threats and turn them into action, I would not stand in her way. I added that if any formal steps were taken, I would handle everything properly, through the correct channels, with calm and respect for our daughter. I did not raise my voice or use sharp words. I simply stated a fact, like placing a final piece on a table. She stared at me, surprised by my calm. She said that I was trying to scare her. I answered that I had no interest in scaring anyone. I said that I was tired of being the man people pointed at and called controlling while ignoring her choices. I reminded her that I had not shouted, thrown anything, or tried to keep her from leaving the house. All I had done was ask for boundaries and, when those were refused, start preparing myself for the path she kept naming aloud. She went quiet for a few seconds, then turned away and walked to the bedroom, phone already in her hand. When she disappeared down the hallway, the living room felt suddenly larger. I sat on the couch and took my phone from my pocket. A small notification slid across the top of the screen with a gentle vibration. It was a reminder I had set earlier, labeled Paper Drop 8:05 a.m. The words glowed in the dim light for a moment. On the coffee table in front of me lay a single USB stick, marked only with the day's date in small writing. I picked it up between my fingers and turned it slowly, feeling the weight of all the records inside it. I did not tap the reminder away. I let it linger there until the screen dimmed again, knowing that the next morning would not be about threats or performances anymore. It would be about finally matching her words with the quiet, careful steps I had been taking all along. Monday morning, I walked into Darren's tower lobby with empty hands and a full decision. Lena stood near the cafe with him, smiling like this was another scene to perform. She repeated that either I accepted her friend completely or she would file for divorce. I said she would not need to. A process server stepped forward, confirmed her name, and handed her a divorce petition with temporary custody orders. Conversations around us slowed. Darren's hand slipped from her shoulder. As I turned toward the glass doors, the elevator bell chimed there behind me, and I did not look back.